Welcome back, focused learners. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we're diving into something huge. A truly monumental shift in the world of project management. We're talking about the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide, and specifically, we're looking at the massive leap into its 7th edition. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill manual update. It is a complete paradigm shift. We're moving away from those rigid step-by-step processes of the past and shifting toward a totally dynamic system built entirely around principles and performance. So if you manage teams, drive initiatives, or honestly just want to understand the modern architecture of how we actually deliver business value today, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get into it. So here is the roadmap for our explainer today. First up, we'll cover the PMBOK paradigm shift itself. Then, we'll map out the 8 new project performance domains. After that, we'll shift our focus over to stakeholder engagement, followed by the specific tools you need to master that engagement. And finally, we'll cast our eyes to the horizon and take a quick peek at PMBOK 8. All right, Section 1, the PMBOK paradigm shift. From processes to principles. To really grasp what's happening here, we have to acknowledge that this edition totally disrupts decades of traditional project management. For years, all the way up through PMBOK 6, the standard was incredibly prescriptive. It relied heavily on rigid knowledge areas, which are now totally deprecated, by the way. It was all about this massive matrix of inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. And the ultimate focus? The deliverable. It was simply, did you build the thing? But PMBOK 7, it completely flips the script. Now it's a principles-based system. It introduces adaptable performance domains. So it doesn't just ask if you built the thing anymore. It asks if that deliverable actually drove real outcomes and created tangible business value. It's a fundamental shift from just focusing on how to do it to deeply understanding why we're doing it in the first place. And honestly, this next quote brilliantly captures the core philosophy behind the entire shift. Projects are performed by people and for people. It sounds so simple, right? But this is exactly why rigid processes just aren't cutting it anymore. You can have literally the most perfect schedule or a flawless budget, but if you ignore the human ecosystem, your project is basically doomed. In fact, if you look at the case studies, they all show the exact same thing. Focusing on people and adaptive leadership is precisely what separates a massive success from a total systemic failure. And that sets the stage perfectly for how we measure project success right now. That brings us right to Section 2, the 8 project performance domains. Welcome to the brand new terrain of project management. When you zoom out and look at the whole PMBOK 7 system, you're going to find 12 overarching project management principles acting as this guiding umbrella right at the top. Now, these aren't strict rules, they're more like behavioral guidelines. We're talking about concepts like being a diligent steward, navigating complexity, and relentlessly focusing on value. So those 12 principles guide your behavior as you operate down within the 8 project performance domains clustered below them. These domains are basically groups of related activities that are absolutely critical for actually delivering project outcomes. Okay, so what exactly are these domains? Let's run through them. We have stakeholders, team, development approach and lifecycle, planning, project work, delivery, measurement, and uncertainty. Now, I need you to notice something really important here. These are not isolated sequential phases. It's not a checklist where you finish one and move on to the next. No way. They act as a concurrent, interactive system. You are constantly managing uncertainty, constantly measuring, planning, and engaging your team all at the exact same time to ensure you deliver those successful outcomes. All right, moving to Section 3, we are going to zero in on the very first domain listed, shifting to stakeholder engagement. Because at the end of the day, strong relationship building is your best defense against systemic failure. Let's quickly ground ourselves with the definition. A stakeholder is any individual, group, or organization that may affect, be affected by, or, and I absolutely love this part, even just perceive itself to be affected by your project's outcome. That inclusion of perception is huge. Your project might have a tiny core group of stakeholders, or you could literally be impacting millions of people. And trust me, their power and their interests are going to continuously shift as your project unfolds. Notice the very specific wording PMBOK 7 uses here. We are shifting away from passive management toward active bidirectional engagement. Think about it. Past editions always talked about stakeholder management, which kind of subtly implies this one-way street, like you're just controlling them or managing a resource. The new standard recognizes that true lasting success requires trust. It requires co-creation and transparent two-way discourse. You don't manage human beings, you engage them. So, the big question. How do we actually do that in the real world? Well, we turn this abstract concept into an actionable process. Step 1, identify everyone. And I mean everyone. Leave absolutely no stone unturned. Step 2, gather data. You want both quantitative facts and qualitative info so you can really understand their emotional drivers and cultural context. Step 3, rigorously analyze their power, interest, and impact. Step 4, prioritize your engagement based on that influence. And finally, Step 5, actively engage them using a communication plan that is completely tailored to their specific needs. I mean, your CEO needs a high-level brief, right? But your lead engineer needs the detailed technical specs. Which flows perfectly into Section 4, Mastering Stakeholder Analysis Tools. Because how do we actually pull off all that analysis and prioritization? Let's check out the operational tools project managers are using today. First up is the classic power/interest grid. This is a brilliant way to build your strategy. Basically, you plot your stakeholders based on two things: their authority, which is their power, and their level of concern, which is their interest. If someone has high power and high interest, they are your key players. You need to manage them closely. What if they have high power but low interest? You keep them satisfied so they don't suddenly decide to use that power against you. Low power but high interest? Keep them informed because they can actually become your biggest advocates. And those with low power and low interest, you just monitor them. This grid is a game changer because it tells you exactly where to focus your limited energy. But wait, what if you are navigating a wildly complex environment with a million different voices? Well, that is exactly where the salience model comes in. It analyzes stakeholders across three totally distinct attributes. First is power, their actual capacity to influence the project. Second is legitimacy. Do they have a moral or contractual right to even be involved? And third is urgency. Just how time-sensitive are their claims? By mapping out these three attributes, you can identify dangerous or even dormant stakeholders way before a massive political crisis blows up your project. Once you know exactly who everyone is, you track them continuously using a Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix, or SEAM for short. This is such an awesome visual diagnostic tool. You list out your stakeholders and map them across 5 levels of engagement, ranging all the way from unaware and resistant to supportive and leading. You simply drop a C to mark their current state and a D for where you desire them to be. Let's say your project sponsor is currently sitting at neutral, but for this to work, you absolutely need them leading. Boom. You've just identified a critical alignment gap, and your communication strategy needs to solve that gap immediately. All right, rounding out with Section 5, the horizon, PMBOK 8. Look, project management is a discipline that is continuously evolving, so let's cast our eyes forward and talk about what is coming down the pipeline next. When we look at the evolutionary timeline here, it's kind of like watching a fascinating pendulum swing. In the past, we had those highly rigid, predictable processes of PMBOK 6. Today, we're living in the present with the adaptive, behavioral, principles-first mindset of PMBOK 7. But looking to the future, PMBOK 8 is aiming to strike the perfect balance. It's going to keep that behavioral why we love in PMBOK 7, but it's going to bring back more of the practical how-to processes that practitioners all over the globe have been asking for. In fact, PMBOK 8 is going to consolidate our current 8 domains down into 7 highly practical functional areas. We're looking at governance, scope, schedule, finance, stakeholders, resources, and risk. This grounds the whole framework back into the tangible things that managers are overseeing every single day. Plus, it's slated to introduce expanded guidance on artificial intelligence, digital analytics, and environmental sustainability. It's literally baking the realities of our modern world directly into the core standard. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. As these global standards evolve, moving away from rigid box-checking processes and toward complex adaptive principles, ask yourself, is your own adaptive leadership ready for the complex systems of tomorrow? Mastering these performance domains, and especially how you engage the real human beings on your projects, well, it's no longer just a soft skill. It is the absolute core architecture of project success. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep adapting, and I will see you in the next one.